to Duel!
That's right, we're talking about duels. Not just any duels, we're talking about spell duels, the far more epic counterpart to D&D's Counterspell and the things involved with that and some of the bad moments that Counterspell and the bad rap that Counterspell gets. This is spell duels. Because I think it's much more epic to have magic clash mid-air in a spell duel, fighting to see whose spell wins instead of counterspelling. Your spell fizzles to go off before you're able even to cast. Even the description's lame when you're like, oh, fire buff, oh, your magic fizzles in front of you. Yes, it can create epic moments where somebody counterspells, and we have plenty of those things we've seen online of like, oh, counterspell, but it just leads to a very bad play style where reactions are counterspells and then you're counterspelling counterspells, and it just all turns into this weird gotcha between all these different spellcasters. It does not lead to epic descriptions for what I'm about to blow your minds with here. Now, before I get too carried away and excited, this spell duel system is a core part of the DC20 TTRPG game system that I'm developing and going to be releasing here in a few days by the time you're watching this video. DC20 is a brand new TTRPG that's taking D&D and Pathfinder, dialing the knobs to 11 and cranking up the level of epicness that's in store. And as you can see with just this one little sliver of this concept of spell duels, it's gonna be crazy. So let me pitch you this idea of spell duels, see if you like the concept of it, and maybe it inspires you to create your own homebrew for Dungeons and Dragons to be able to use it in those games. But here we go. The only key parts of DC20 that you need to be able to understand is DC20 has a 4 action point system. There is no reaction in DC20. There are reactions that you can take, and whenever you have something that lets you be able to take a reaction to, like an opportunity attack or a spell duel, you can spend your action points that you have. But again, you only have 4 action points. Whenever a combat happens, initiative's rolled, and everything's starting to go off, you have 4 action points. If you spend action points on reactions before your turn comes, once it's your turn, you have less action points. You use those, your turn ends, you get them back for the next round. So whenever I say something costs action points, a spell duel costs 2 action points to be able to do. And the reason why that's also balanced compared to D&D is in D&D, you spend a reaction to cancel someone's action. And in general, spellcasters don't have as much as they can do with their reactions anyway, so it's not a fair trade. So in DC20, you can spend 2 action points. So half of your turn, you can spend 2 action points to initiate a spell duel. Another thing I guess you need to know about DC20 is you have a mana point system. It is not spell slots. Oh dear God, it's not spell slots. You have a mana point system, you have a pool of mana, and you can spend your mana however you want. Cool, right? That's not what we're talking about here though. When you initiate a spell duel, you have a moment to choose how much mana you want to pour into that spell duel moment. Because this person's spell that you're trying to duel, they made a spell check, they cast a spell in a certain way, and they put mana into their spell, and it goes off. And you have the same moment, you have a reaction, where if you see a person casting a spell, you can take a reaction to try and stop it with your own magic. Now there are 2 big requirements that comes in here, because you can't just be like, oh, I'm gonna spell duel you. Like, no, this is also a very vibrant, a very dynamic description of what's happening when this magic collides midair. The first requirement is you have to have a spell that makes sense for you to be able to duel this person in this way. Now, this is a very wide open on purpose to be able to interpretation. Maybe if somebody's casting, let's just use Fireball for a simple example. Somebody's casting Fireball at some of your friends, and you're in between them, and you want to cast Cone of Cold to counter their Fireball. Does that look like a counterspell where you just counterspell and then I couldn't cast Fireball? No, you know what it looks like? They cast Fireball and you cast Cone of Cold to try and intercept the Fireball. I just got chills thinking about that. So you blast the Cone of Ice midair to try and intercept the Fireball. The ice and the fire hits and melts. Who's gonna win? Now, before we get into how the contest works, because it's gonna be a contested check, one person versus another. Before we get into that, I still have to do how you start one. Those 2 requirements. So that first one is you have to have a spell that makes sense. Maybe someone's casting Fireball. Maybe it makes sense for you and your Cone of Cold. That makes sense. Or maybe you're an abjurative wizard and you have shields and protective magic, and the people that they're targeting, they're gonna, okay, I'm going to shield and put some sort of barrier or dome around my friends so the Fireball hits the dome instead of them. Again, so much more epic. Or maybe I'm a mentalist, I'm a scion, I have psionic powers and I can get into people's minds, and maybe I want to mess with that person's mind and get in their mind, so as they're casting a Fireball, the fire's swirling around them, I assault their mind and try and mess with them. Either way, that is all all just flavor. You have to be able to have a spell that makes sense in whatever way you're describing, and that's going to be a thing at the table to kind of see if we're all on the same page about. I can't wait to see how many different stories about people, what spell countered what other spell. That's so cool. And it's also up to Dungeon Masters on how strict they want to be. I have certain extra rules, extra variant rules that Dungeon Masters can attach on to this, where they can have, it has to be certain schools or opposite schools of magic or certain types and all those different things. But in general, it is a very open, on purpose concept. So now the second requirement is that spell that you've chosen that makes sense that it could counter. It has to be within range of the person who's casting the spell, the target that they're casting the spell at, or some point between those two. So in order to spell duel that fireball that's being cast, I don't know, it's over there. For some reason, I'm picturing somebody right now casting a fireball from there to there. Anyway, I would have to be able to, with my magic of the spell that I've chosen, I'd have to be able to target them or their target or some point between. And my 3 examples perfectly matched up to that. The Cone of Cold is a blast between the two of them. I got it. The Abjurative Shield is a shield that, between there, or I can mess with their mind psychically. But each of those examples could also shift around. I could have a Cone of Cold be I only can target my friends, and I blast out a Cone of Cold over my friends, and I'm not damaging them with my own Cone of Cold. I'm blasting the Cone of Cold above, and that's the same type concept. You get the idea. Now, so spellcasters have this reaction. Marshals have a reaction called an opportunity attack that only marshals can do. Spellcasters have a reaction called Spell Duel that only spellcasters can do. Yes, that's right. DC20 separates that line down the middle between marshals and spellcasters. There's lots of beautiful duality, symmetry moments there as well. But you're not going to be able to just make quick opportunity attacks with weapons that you're highly trained with somehow as a spellcaster. Nope, you're going to be able to spell duel. Time out. Here with this whole DC20 thing, we are taking everything to the next level. And one of those things includes the world, the campaign setting, and the sponsor of this video. World Anvil takes your world to the next level, and your campaign, your notes, the timelines, different things that you can organize and put in there, share with your players, keep to yourself, all of that stuff. And World Anvil is going to be where me and part of my team that's developing the campaign setting for DC20 is going to be working inside of. World Anvil really does have a lot of pieces to the puzzle of being able to flesh out an entire world. So me and my team are going to be playing inside of World Anvil, fleshing out the world and different parts of it, and really building it out to then turn it into a campaign setting. World Anvil is literally built for this. I think it does a great job of it, and that's why me and my team are going to be using it. And you can use it yourself too and explore around all the very intuitive layout of how they have everything organized, whether you're running a module or an entire homebrew world. I guarantee you, world builders just poking around on there, you'll stumble into something about, you know what, I never thought of that. So check out World Anvil, links down in the description, and thank you to World Anvil for sponsoring this video. All right, now back to the duels. So anyway, now that you've initiated a spell duel, how does that contest look like? Another little rule in DC20 that I think is very core to this being so epic and so possible is every time you cast the spell, you make a spell check. So when you cast Fireball in DC20, you make a spell check, and that spell check represents the fireball. The higher you roll on that fireball, the more damage it deals. In any type of, if you're mind controlling somebody, you make a spell check. I hate in Dungeons and Dragons how you, I'm going to cast slow, and then you just say that. Like the player at the table is like, I'm going to cast slow. They don't do anything. They just say, I'm going to cast slow or dominate person or whatever. And then Dungeon Master makes a roll behind their screen. They say a number, and then you succeed or fail. And it feels real bad when they say like, oh, sorry, I got a 20 something or whatever. And you're like, okay. So then you said words, they roll the secret dice, and then you didn't do anything. You didn't get to roll anything. So in DC20, spellcasting at its core, I would do a whole video on that too. I will. Spellcasting, you always roll a D20. In some way, shape, or form, you're going to be rolling a D20 for however well your spell goes. If you're dominating a person, you're trying to mind control somebody, you're making a spell check versus their mental saving throw, their intelligence save, their charisma save, the mental save, right? And that's going to be a contest to see if you overpower them, right? There we go. So every spell in DC20 has a spell check that the caster makes to do it. And you're going to be like, all right, I'm going to cast Fireball. I'm going to make my spell check. As soon as that spell check happens, someone can spell duel it, right? That spell check that they make for their spell is what's coming into the whole spell. So if they had a weak spell cast and they only got like a 13 on their spell check, all right, it's going to be easy to counter because it's also a weak cast of the spell. But if they rolled like a 20 something, oh my gosh, this really big fireball's coming at us. Oh no. You better stop it and see what happens. Now, you have to initiate a spell duel once they say the roll, but before they say the number. And the same type of rule is true all the time when it comes to shielding type things and all those reactionary things. So you want to do a spell duel, you are comparing your spell duel to their spell duel. So from the perspective of the spell dueler, you see that fireball going off. You want to spell duel it, right? You want to try and stop them. If you succeed, their spell stops and fizzles and is done. If they succeed, you were not able to. Their fireball melted straight through the ice you were blasting off. They were able to fight you off. They were able to blast through whatever things, and their spell goes off as planned. You still spent those 2 action points and mana to be able to do this spell duel. Ah, dang it. But if you had succeeded, you would have spent 2 action points and the mana, and they would have now wasted their action points that they put into the spell and their mana points they put into the spell. But again, it's the same risk and the same 4 action points versus 4 action points, or however many the enemy has, whatever, you get the idea. It's action points traded and mana point traded, and it's fair. Now, the one little topic of mana is in that spell check. Whenever you compare spell checks, you gain a bonus on your spell check equal to the mana that you put into it, right? So if somebody's casting a spell and they spent 3 mana on it, they're getting a +3 on top of the stuff they already get for their spell check. And when you choose the counterspell, not counterspell, you're spell dueling. When you choose the spell duel and you see them casting a big spell, you get a moment to choose. You're always spending 2 action points as a reaction, so you're spending those 2 action points, and you get to choose how much mana you want to spend on it. Now, every character has a mana spend limit that you can only spend a certain amount of mana depending on the level of your character. That's a whole nother topic. But you could choose to spend, I'm going to spend 3 on this one. So a level 10 player can cast up to 5 mana in a spell. It's always half your level, right? So you can cast 5 mana. So whenever you get a spell duel, you're like, yeah, I'm just going to do 2 mana on this one. You get a little +2 bonus. You could still beat them if you roll high enough. Now you might ask yourself, what happens on a tie? What happens on an exact tie in a spell duel? That's a very rare chance. It's less than a 1 in 20 chance of you matching exactly. That's a crazy moment, in my opinion. That's a wild moment. So wild that a wild magic surge happens. Now I have a whole DC20 table of wild magic surge, and trust me, if y'all are familiar with my wild magic systems, I am a connoisseur of wild magic. I love it. And I have a D20 wild magic system, wild magic table just for this type of moment, right? Now, it is the same wild magic as other things, so it's not like this one-off thing that's just a side little, just for spell duels. It's weaved into the actual game itself. But a wild magic surge happens for each person, and that's just crazy. And another thing that's crazy is you can have multiple people try and do a spell duel. So you can have, if someone's casting the Lich is casting Circle of Death. If this Circle of Death goes off, the barbarian who's on death's door right at his feet, and the fighter that's right next to him, and they're in trouble. This is bad. We need to stop the spell. Multiple people on your team, multiple player characters, multiple allies can come together to try and all counter the spell. You would each spend your 2 action points, you would each spend your mana, and all of you would make your spell checks to try and fight and contest that one spell check. But there's also a system in DC20 that allows characters to cast the same spell together. If you know the same spell, if 2 characters know the same spell, they can cast that spell together. So yes, in DC20, you could have 2 enemy casters and 2 player character casters, and both of these 2 enemies are coming together to cast a spell of evil, death, and darkness, and fire, and brimstone, and they are both casting a spell together, and together they are casting that one massive spell, and you and your allies stand side by side. Just got chills again, and you have to stop them. Your magics collide midair. What happens? If any of this sounds epic as hell to you, then think about supporting DC20 on Patreon. Right now, it is in alpha development, and by the time you're watching this video, we are within days or a small amount of weeks before the release of alpha. The alpha of the game is going to be levels 1 and 2 of all 11 classes right now, and I'm going to be releasing and updating all of this stuff that's going on. There's going to be 2 ways to get the alpha. One way is to be a bronze dragon on Patreon, which is a higher reward tier, yes, and those people have been supporting the game, and those people are going to get feedback and all this different types of stuff for playtesting and be able to help sculpt the game and get feedback on the game. But if you just want to get access to the game, I have a second option that I've added for people to be able to get the game and just play it and see what's going on. It will be available on my website. All of those things are going to be I'm going to make an announcement video. I'm going to talk about it on Discord. It's going to be very simple to find. All the rules so you can get in there and play this game and see how truly epic it is. I think it's going to be a game changer. And if just this concept of spell duels is cool, gosh, you have no idea. The help action's also cool. People coming together and helping each other to do stuff. I could go on. And in fact, I will go on. I'm going to be making lots of more DC20 videos, especially once the alpha releases. I'm going to be making topics and talking about each of these different things. And if this does sound interesting and you want to join and support this in this way, patrons are the the only way that any of this is possible. Everything from a $5 patron all the way up to the top tier patrons, every single one of you is what made this possible, and truly, truly, thank you. The reception has been absolutely wild. I'm going to be doing a live stream revealing a very, very large YouTuber that is wanting to join the ranks of DC20 and join the community and start creating content for it. Lots of other YouTubers are kind of seeing what's going on here, and it's going to be crazy. So check that out. Links down in the description. You know what to do. Now, I'm going to share one story from a GenCon playtest that was an absolute crazy spell duel moment. I did a full breakdown play-by-play of this in my most recent live stream. Towards the end of it, I'll link that down in the description. But here's what happened. It was at the very tail end of combat. It was 6 players versus 6 enemies. The enemy cleric was the last one standing, and it was their turn, and they had a spell to cast. They were going to cast Guiding Bolt, but a much more necrotic, like evil version twisted of it, because in DC20 also, clerics can choose holy or unholy, and this was an unholy cleric. And they were casting a necrotic Guiding Bolt at the final player character, who was at 1 hit point. Everyone was alive. All 6 player characters were alive, but there's 1 player character at 1 hit point, and they were within range. And Guiding Bolt deals 4 damage. This person's at 1 hit point. In DC20 also is if you ever reach -3 hit points, you die immediately, right? That's all it's called. There's a death's door mechanic, and that number changes over time. But if you reach -3 hit points, you die immediately. This person was at 1 hit point, and I was hitting them with a 4 damage spell to bring them to -3 and would kill them immediately. So if this spell goes off, they die. Then one of the most epic things in my TTRPG experience happened at this GenCon playtest. All 3 spellcasters said, spell duel. Yes, all 3 casters, a sorcerer, a wizard, and a cleric of the player character side, all were within range of their ally to try and stop this spell. I, as the unholy cleric, describe the casting of this Guiding Bolt, and I make my spell check. I rolled an 18 on the dice. They had a +4 modifier and a +1 for mana, so that was an 18 +5 for a total of 23. So now each of those 3 player characters had to make a 23. They had to beat a 23 to be able to save their friend. So one at a time, we went through each player as they described what spell they were casting to try and stop this magic from killing their friend. Wizard was first up and described as some sort of abjurative barrier around their friend. Made their spell check, 7 on the dice. Not enough. The player characters actually had the same modifiers to their roll, so they really needed to roll a 19 or 20 on the dice. So the first one didn't make it. The cleric described some sort of healing magic, and they wanted to kind of wrap their ally in healing magic to try and heal them before the damage came in. What a cool description of a cleric doing a counterspell, right? Before the killing blow comes in, they heal them just enough to be able to save them. What a cool description of how a spell duel would look. They rolled a 14 on the dice. Still not enough. We came to the final player character, which was a sorcerer. This was an enchantment sorcerer. They had an arcane type of sorcerer that they were doing. And also sorcerers in DC20 have a really cool, interesting feature. They have an overload mechanic that gives them, they take damage, and the whole, I'm not going to get into what the overload mechanic does. They basically take damage from their magic, ripping their bodies apart as they push the magic inside of them to the absolute limits. And with taking all this damage and pushing themselves this way, they gain a +5 bonus to all spell checks, including spell duels. A spell check's a spell check. So this sorcerer now adds more to their check than the other ones do. Now, they're paying for it with as part of the class mechanics and stuff, right? But now, instead of only needing a 19 or 20, they would be able to succeed with a 14 all the way up through 20. And now, the table sees this could be it. He could stop him. He describes mentally assaulting this cleric's mind. Stop! And like the command spell. And that's how they were going to spell duel them, is to get them to stop casting the spell. Makes the spell check. 10 on the dice. Wasn't enough. Wasn't enough. And now this group of friends around the table at Gen Con in this really extremely intense moment at the end of just a one-shot. My stomach was in a knot. There's 2 people teared up at the table. And then one of the most beautiful descriptions of a spell duel ever. I described this cleric casting this unholy blight Guiding Bolt, firing through an abjurative barrier, firing through their own mental, fighting themselves as their mind gets assaulted, as the sorcerers trying to get in their heads and stop them. No, the magic continues forward in this almost like slow motion bullet time type moment. And it was the final description of that cleric trying to embolden and heal the ally. They get wrapped up in healing magic. They start glowing. Their wounds start to heal partially. And then the opposing cleric's magic hits their friend, erodes them, skin withering, the light that dulls down, skin withering, aging rapidly, rapidly, stop moving, fading. Sent it over to the player. I gave them their final words. Do you have any final words before you say it? And the player elevated it one step farther as they, from their perspective, described that whole thing of them seeing, I look around and I see all of my friends. The player character's name was Andromeda. I see all my friends. I see what we've done. I see what we accomplished. And I see them trying to save me in the last bit of moment. And I just smile. Boom. That was it. Absolutely crazy moment. And and this is not a brag on DC20. This is I love seeing the mechanics of DC20 tell epic stories. This version in D&D, again, I'm not trying to sling mud here. This version in D&D would have been, I say the spell and then counterspell, and then they would have made checks and they would have made it or not. And then even the description at the end would have been like, oh, nothing. It would not have been the visual display that moment was. And in that moment, that was crazy. It was crazy. I keep getting moments like that from this DC20 thing. I keep getting more and more excited, and I can't wait to share it with you guys. So stay tuned. Let me know what y'all think, and I can't wait to show y'all the next one. I'm going to keep revealing these rules in these videos, and you can check out. I will probably update the description of this video as well to keep always the link to the alpha in the description as well. So anyway, stay creative. Whew, I think I set the box.